marketing consultancy. We've been in business for about 30 some years. And in that time, we've seen a fair share of change. Some of that change good, some of it like now, not too good, but it's forced us to adapt. And I think that really presents a lot of opportunities here, which makes for this to be a great discussion for us to be having when it comes to hospitality and recovery. Brian?
Yes, so I'm Brian Edwards. I'm CEO of Edwards Technologies. We've been in business for 30 plus years. And what I think is very interesting is that as much as we've always worked in silos, technology, marketing, IT, the opportunities that we see plus the needs we see create this need to work much more closely together in maybe like task force-like teams. So our company has a lot of years of working with different technologies, and I think that'll just show up as we describe. So Corey, let me turn it back to you.
Sure. So I think probably the easiest way to kick off the discussion here is to sort of touch on what you just mentioned, Brian, about operating in silos. I think that you mentioned to me the other day when we were discussing this that the key thing to keep in mind is that we don't know what we don't know. So where we need to focus our efforts really is on where we do have a knowledge of what's to come, where we can make plans, and where we can take advantage of areas where we've maybe missed an opportunity in the past when it comes to sort of bringing these silos or taking them out of silos when it comes to marketing, IT, technology, communications, and really bring them all together. And it goes to that task force point that you mentioned, I think is really going to be an important factor. We can't necessarily be thinking of how can we do this with IT, what marketing messaging can we focus on right now, and then what can we focus on later. There needs to be sort of this giant umbrella that houses all of these things, and look at this more as effectively an entire transformation, an organizational transformation that'll allow for an effective and safe recovery that is going to keep guests safe, that's going to keep them happy, and is going to sort of educate them on the new set of expectations when it comes to the hospitality experience.
You know, I agree 100%. And what I'd want to add is not only do we got to communicate with the guests, but we have employees that are just as important to communicate to as the guests. You know, we're entering into this world, as you said, well, we don't know what we don't know. So what we do know, though, is that we need to be really flexible. We know that things will not turn on like a switch. You know, I've been reading every blog, every video, every news clip I can find, and it seems even in those places that are coming back, they're coming back slow. So that requires, you know, almost like a scenario type of planning. You know, so maybe you have between marketing and tech, we've had 6 scenarios in the can. And as we move up the ladder of higher percentage of utilization of the facilities, we can kick the tech up more and more, and use more of it to help guide expectations.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's something that I wanted to talk to you about too. Is when we've been discussing this, one of the things that we've been saying is that there is sort of there needs to be this staggered approach to utilization. So you're not going to flip a switch and all of a sudden have your entire property operational overnight. You know, we've talked a lot about Vegas. And Vegas, you know, you're looking at some places that have capacity to hold hundreds of thousands of people at any given time. So you're not going to be able to just flip a switch. And I think simultaneously, guests, employees, people aren't necessarily going to be comfortable coming back to an environment like that. So I think if you want to maybe touch on some of the implementations that you think would make the most sense to start with from a tech standpoint. I know that from a marketing standpoint, I mentioned to you that I think it's really important to focus in on the re-education, teaching people about the new expectations, how properties are. You know, your marketing message is no longer we have the best buffets, but it's we have the safest cleaning process and the most use of disinfectant in a room, et cetera, et cetera. And from a tech standpoint, if you want to talk a bit about what some of those early stage implementations can be from a reopening and utilization standpoint, that'd be great.
Oh, fantastic. So the way I've been looking at it is that tech is going to really be the biggest tool you can use to communicate all these concepts. And that tech has to be a combination of what's on your mobile app, if you have one, probably an upgrade of the digital signage that happens in the common area because of the need to be able to change that more quickly to reflect conditions, as well as something that we were working on before the shutdown was a new way to look at the TV inside of the room itself and use that more as a dashboard. And all of these things have been in the works and been discussed and been actually, reviewed quite seriously and were in line to be implemented. I just think that they went into the silo call or the bucket called "Wouldn't it be nice?" and when we have money.
Right.
I think now it moves front and center because it's the most cost-effective, fastest way to be able to communicate with guests. And I also want to say with employees too. So one of the things that we didn't talk about, but I thought about since we talked, Corey, was that in a very theatrical way, we were working on a new retail concept.
Right.
And we were using watches to communicate to the employees when they needed to be on their marks, where they needed to go. So I think we combine all those technologies. We have a powerful tool.
Yeah, and I think that also goes to even expand on that. It's sort of integrating that tech the same way, the in-room experience is going to have to change because you're really going to need to have this washover of contactless, non-person to person interaction with the property. And this is where I think you're really looking at an opportunity here to see AI become a much more significant component in hospitality, because you're going to need it not just from a guest experience or an employee experience, but also from a logistical standpoint. You can't have a valet with 500 people waiting for their cars. You can't have a group of people standing at check-in in lines, in close proximity lines for 45 minutes while they wait to check in. So you're going to have a new logistics system in place using these technologies that is both for things like scheduling, things like check-in, things like even using your all rooms are going to have to be equipped with new key card systems so that you could use your mobile phone instead of the with traditional key cards. And you see it at some hotels, but I mean, I understand why there's been a little bit of hesitation in implementing it, because these are expensive these are expensive things to do if you're just doing them in a single shot. And when historically it's been nice and it's been something that has a long-term value, it's not necessarily something that it's sort of been the approach of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this has been a case of, well, why spend $5 million on upgrading our doors when our doors are working just fine the way they are right now? And I think that also lends itself to another point that we were discussing, which is the issue in sort of another missed opportunity in the use of data. And I think that you had some points on there that I think are really valuable if you want to share some of those.
Yeah. So one of the challenges we're going to have is that we're operating at reduced utilizations on purpose. So we need to make the most out of what we have. So if you have a restaurant with maybe now only 100 seats, it's going to be really important that those 100 seats are filled all the time so you can maximize the potential. So I think using data that says that this guest likes steak or this guest likes sushi and making suggestions using machine learning as to what guests you want to recommend that to, and even, be so forward as to say, I can get your reservation at 8 p.m. because you know a little bit about them. So I think it's time that we can put all those tools together and not only serve the purpose of making guests feel better, but also maximizing revenue.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, the big focal point is that so they're using the data that already exists. I mean, we're talking about systems in some cases between guest loyalty programs, mobile applications, guest history. There's so much information that these properties and these organizations already have. There just hasn't been much of an application developed or put in place that allows for the data that's in place to be used for profit maximization with just a small nudge. Like you said, the in-room system that we've been discussing, that you and Edwards have put together. It's the nudge to make a reservation for somebody when because you know that they like steak and there's a new steakhouse, and offering them a discount at happy hour, something like that. It's something that's already done, but in a much more manual way. And I think the use of these technologies, the use of these capabilities, and the thought of how the guest experience and the employee experience really needs to shift more towards providing them with everything they're accustomed to, but without the traditional guest interaction, without the sort of perceived risk of human interaction that we're dealing with right now. The key is really going to be technology, and then from a marketing communication standpoint, it's going to be a question of teaching people what this new technology is, showing them how to use it, explaining to them why this is a better system. Sending people text messages when their room has been cleaned and giving them a rundown of exactly how it was cleaned, giving them details of what was done, what wasn't done. It's really going to be, providing people with a room clean report is something that is a little harder to do when you don't have a system in place that takes in to account that isn't set up logistically with AI. And if you do implement it with and tie that into the in-room, tie it into the guest experience, then we're looking at the potential to really put people's minds at ease, make them comfortable with their stay, and ultimately build a greater degree of loyalty down the line, because that's sort of where the guest expectation is moving.
So I would just wrap it up by just saying it's a holistic approach is what we're really going for.
I think that's the perfect way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. I wanted to thank everybody at ICE North America too for putting this all together. It's nice to see that we're getting creative, and nice that we actually have the capabilities to do it thanks to to tech.